Hello, BookTube. Well, it's Tuesday, and that means Tag Tuesday. And it's also September, which means Shake-tember, the BookTube event formerly known as ShakeTube, that's put on by A Day of Small Things, Books I'm Not Reading, and Old Blues Chapter and Verse to celebrate Shakespeare in the month of September. Reading 3 plays and also now an original Shakespeare tag, the Shakespeare Journey Tag, in which Kelly at Books I'm Not Reading tagged me. So I thought I would do that today. And we'll start with prompt number 1. What was your first experience reading Shakespeare, and what was it like? I came to reading late, and I came to reading Shakespeare late. I saw Shakespeare long before I read him, and heard about him long before I read him, and heard all kinds of superlatives, the greatest superlatives that are ladled on any writer. Now, it took me a while to realize that those superlatives are, in this rare instance, accurate. But I came to him. My first experience reading Shakespeare was disappointment, believe it or not. I was reading a Shakespeare play, and I was thinking, all right, I've heard everything great about this guy. But I'm reading this play, and it seems really familiar, but I've read this before. This seems to me just inaccurate, first of all, to any kind of history, but also the words themselves seem really familiar. And they were familiar. I was familiar from the North translation of Plutarch. And this North Plutarch runs all throughout Shakespeare, often, very large part, quoted word for word. Understandably so, since North's writing in his translation of Plutarch is brilliant. It's beautiful. So my first experience with reading Shakespeare was a little bit of disappointment, ironically enough, considering how much joy that reading has brought me in subsequent decades, centuries, and millennia. Then prompt number 2 is, has the reading of a Shakespeare play ever brought you to tears? What scene was it, and where were you when it happened? No, I'm just a wee bit older than a lot of the people who will be doing this tag. No Shakespeare scene has ever brought me to tears. No reading experience has ever brought me to tears. No. Losing a friend, being at their bedside as they fade away to death. I experienced tragedy where your whole home burns to the ground and everything you own in it. Reading, no. I guess I'm not a good reader, but nothing has, no part of Shakespeare or any other writing has ever brought me to tears. We'll just move on to number 3. Number 3 is, are there any people that have played a significant role in your Shakespeare journey? Yes, there have been 2 actors and 2 Shakespeare fans, Shakespeare scholars and fans. All 4 of those people together, I don't think any of them knew each other, but they all played a very significant role. One old friend in particular, who I will always associate with Shakespeare. And thanks to a lot of his writing, I think a lot of other people will always associate him with Shakespeare too. These people showed me all the worlds that are contained in here, all the things that are contained in this author, that I might have missed if I hadn't had their guidance. So I'm eternally grateful. All I try to do is pay it forward, push Shakespeare on other people, tell them that he is absolutely as great as his reputation says. Prompt number 4 is, do you have a favorite book or film about Shakespeare? Here I would get myself into trouble, because my favorite, no individual book, but my favorite kind of book about Shakespeare are the books saying he didn't write his own plays. I love them so much. I love the Shakespearean authorship controversy so much. I have, I don't know, a dozen books on the subject. I read everything I can get my hands on about it, fiction or nonfiction. I just love it. I absolutely love it. You show me a book like that, and I am on board to read it and think about it and wrestle it around in my mouth and my mind. That's my favorite kind of Shakespeare reading. I know it shouldn't be that, but it is. Let's see here. Question number 5 is, which character in Shakespeare most resembles you, and in what ways? Here I'm going to have to defer to other people. I have no idea. Well, I don't think there are many people. I wonder how many people other than ardent Shakespeare fans these days will know any characters in Shakespeare other than Hamlet. I don't know who. I'm assuming that if people were to put their minds to it, if they were to come up with a similarity, it would probably be Polonius. I'm not going to say for myself. It's going to be for other people to say. Then let's see here. Question number 6 is, which play would you most like to see performed in a theater, and why? I'm assuming this refers to a Shakespeare play and not any other play. There are a whole bunch of plays that over the last 300 years that don't get performed anymore that I would love to see performed, including Marlowe, Shakespeare's own contemporary. When it comes to Shakespeare, I have seen every Shakespeare play performed in a theater. I've seen many of them performed many times, and I've seen some of them performed more times in person in theaters than I can count. I have lost count of how many Coriolanus's I have. I've lost count of how many Hamlets I have. And I don't really mind if when it comes to my preference, it would probably be a tragedy. I don't think the histories do well on the stage. I don't think the comedies do well on the stage or on the page. I don't think they do well at all. Unless an absolutely genius director does a lot with them. That you can't do much better than Kenneth Branagh's Much Ado About Nothing. You can't excel that in many ways. But at how many points in Branagh's Much Ado About Nothing, which is the most sure-eared Shakespeare comedy I've ever seen put on film, for instance, how many of the jokes in that play, as a movie, make you laugh? Almost the whole thing would have made a Shakespearean audience laugh. I don't think comedy preserves that well. Which is why in Much Ado About Nothing you have to bring on, Michael Keaton to goofball things up in a way that is funny, definitely, but I would argue that that's probably the only thing that Shakespeare wrote in that movie that you laugh at. So if I don't really care which tragedy it is, but it would gladly be a tragedy. Then question number 7 is, what actor throughout history would you most like to have seen play Hamlet while in his prime? This one's easy because I almost did do it, and it's a regret of mine that I never did, and this is Peter O'Toole. From 60 years ago, something like that, where he played Hamlet, I think, at the National Theater, and I did not go to see it. I could have, and I didn't. It was a weird casting choice. I don't think the audience reacted well to it. I don't think the critics, all of them, reacted well to it. The thing that would throw them off is something that, if you're familiar with Peter O'Toole from later in his life, when he was an old and craggy actor, you might not realize how unbelievably beautiful he was when he was a young man. You'll see it if you ever watch Lawrence of Arabia, which one critic said if he were any better looking in Lawrence of Arabia, they'd have to call it Florence of Arabia. When O'Toole was young, it isn't just how beautiful he was, it's that there was an aura about him. I would argue the same thing was true of both Richard Harris and also Richard Burton. But most of all O'Toole, who I consider to be the greatest actor of the 20th century, there was an aura about him that did not lend itself to the humble oval, to the little circle, to the stage of a play. It didn't lend itself to that at all. It was very much a movie star feel. He was just too big for the venue. Try as he might to hide that, he was too big for the venue. So you felt yourself bombarded by star power. And star power is different from acting ability. Peter O'Toole had both, but he very much had that star power. And there are circumstances in which you don't want to be bombarded by star power, in which that star power, over which I would argue that the actor actually has no control, will get in the way of the performance. A perfect example of this would be, for those of you of a certain age, most of you are too young to remember or to know who Ethel Merman is, but picture Ethel Merman in her prime. Picture her at 38 years old, playing Lady Macbeth. There's no doubt in my, you're probably laughing, there's no doubt in my mind that she could do that, but it wouldn't work because the audience would be blown away by the star power. They wouldn't be able to concentrate on anything else. That was definitely true with O'Toole's Hamlet. I would love to have seen it. Even so, I would love to have seen it. And I never did. I never got the chance. He never put it on film. To the best of my knowledge, he never did. So I never got to see it. I believe there's film of Richard Burton doing Hamlet, so you can see a kind of a version of what I mean. Burton was better able to put his star power under a bushel than Peter O'Toole was. O'Toole was never really able to do that, and eventually he leaned into it, so that in My Favorite Year, he has that immortal line where he's realizing this is all going to be done live in front of an audience. He says, "Good Lord, I'm not an actor, I'm a movie star." That, unironically, would be true, I bet, in his performance of Hamlet. But that's what I would still like to see, and I never did. Then, let's see here. Prompt number 8 is deliver your favorite speech or soliloquy from a Shakespeare play. I'm going to read my favorite soliloquy. I'm not going to try to deliver it. This is from Shakespeare's Henry VIII. And this is Cardinal Wolsey. who has been wheeling and dealing and engorging himself and making himself great at the expense of the king's honor, and the king has found out about it. In a scene of remarkable subtlety, the king includes a document, the document that Wolsey sends him accidentally, that will damn Wolsey. He includes it in a bunch of papers that he hands to Wolsey to look over, in front of everybody. Wolsey sees it and immediately knows that he has damned himself. He accidentally said the wrong thing to the king. A paper showing him engorging himself with glories at the expense of King Henry VIII. Now, of course, Shakespeare is going to write that in his play, Henry VIII. Of course he's going to do that, because his monarch is Queen Elizabeth I, the daughter of Anne Boleyn, who's no friend of Cardinal Wolsey, and he no friend of hers. So, of course, Shakespeare is going to write that, but he writes something else. He throws in humanity, three-dimensional humanity. He adds a soliloquy from Wolsey. Once that's over, Wolsey's been angrily dismissed from the king's presence, and he knows that doom is upon him. He knows that he will never rise again. And in that moment, a less talented playwright, a less respected playwright, would have just gloried over a fallen Wolsey, would have just had him being sniveling or unworthy or little or petty in that moment, instead of giving him humanity, knowing that this play was going to become the attention of the Queen. Another playwright would have played it safe, and Shakespeare doesn't. Instead, he gives Wolsey a beautiful soliloquy that will wrench your heart. It will not when I read it, but it will wrench your heart and make you care about him, sorry for him. If possible, I don't know if it's captured on video, but Anthony Quayle played Wolsey so well. I believe the BBC production of Henry VIII, he does such a good job. But let me at least read it to you. I won't perform it. So farewell to the little good you bear me. Farewell, a long farewell to all my greatness. This is the state of man. Today he puts forth the tender leaves of hopes. Tomorrow blossoms, and bears his blushing honors thick upon him. The third day comes a frost, a killing frost, when he thinks, good easy man, full surely his greatness is a ripening, nips his root, and then he falls, as I do. I have ventured like little wanton boys that swim on bladders, that swim many summers in a sea of glory, but far beyond my depth. My high-blown pride at length broke under me, and now has left me, weary and old with service, to the mercy of a rude stream that must forever hide me. Vain pomp and glory of this world, I hate ye. And you believe it. He's not just saying this for effect, or he'd say it in front of somebody. Vain pomp and glory of this world, I hate ye. I feel my heart now open. Oh, how wretched is that man that hangs upon a prince's favors. There is, betwixt that smile he would aspire to, that sweet aspect of princes, and their ruin, more pangs and fears than wars of women have. And when he falls like Lucifer, never to hope again. Those of you who are fond of far later theater will recognize a certain echo in Les Mis. Yes? And when he falls like Lucifer. That's what the cokehead writer of that play had in mind, that musical had in mind. That's my favorite bit, is Wolsey coming to realize that he should never have played the game of princes, that it only ends this way. And we know from history that he was lucky. That he died of a broken heart, is what we're told, probably a heart attack, on his way to London. Summoned by the king. We know perfectly well what was waiting for him there. All sorts of liturgical disputes, a long stay in the Tower of London, and then an archbishop beheaded. Wolsey didn't suffer that fate. Everyone else did. Anyway, I could go on and on. We won't do that. So we'll move on to prompt number 9. Do any of Shakespeare's plays intimidate you? If yes, what plays and why? Only one play intimidates me, no matter how long I read it, no matter how well I get to know it, and that's Lear. I think King Lear is a weird thing. It's the theater equivalent of the music of Johann Sebastian Bach, where it doesn't feel completely like a human was involved in writing it. It feels beyond that. I know that a lot of plays are called elemental in their force, in their sheer overwhelming force. I think King Lear is one of the only ones I've ever read that actually has an elemental effect. The closest thing that I would come to something that just leaves you nowhere to hide Most dramas do. You're hiding in your seat. You're in the audience. The lights are down. No one can see you. Play is over there. You've got intermission. You've got afterwards. Most plays leave you plenty of places to hide. Lear doesn't leave you any places to hide. It overwhelms you. In my opinion, the third act, the final act of Our Town by Thornton Wilder also overwhelms you in a far quieter way. And also the whole of Long Day's Journey into Night, it leaves you no place to hide. You are not free to be comfortable. Lear, I think, is the only Shakespeare play that does that. I know that that's a minority opinion. Plenty of people think that about a lot of his plays. I think Lear is the only one that does. I love it. Love it dearly. Let's see here. Prompt number 10 is, what tips would you give to intimidated readers coming to Shakespeare for the first time? The overwhelming tip that I would give you is not to be ashamed to need help. Not only is Shakespeare pretty deep water, but he's also writing in an idiom and a language that's centuries outdated from your own time. So those No Fear Shakespeare, those Shakespeare guides that have Shakespeare's text on one side and modern English on the other, don't scorn those, and don't let anyone scorn you for liking them. That will help you a lot. You will still go to the real play, but that will help to decrease the intimidation factor. You don't have to rely on footnotes and side notes. You can use one of those dual language things to get yourself in the door. There's nothing wrong with that at all. If anybody tells you it is, they're a snob, and therefore their opinions can be disregarded. I would also strongly, strongly advise you to see Shakespeare instead of reading him. See Shakespeare at first. See it until you recognize and understand what's happening in front of you on the screen or the stage. Go to every Shakespeare on-stage performance anywhere around you that you can. Look. Go looking for those. Doesn't matter if it's community theater. Doesn't matter if, the apothecary is your hardware guy. Doesn't matter. Go anyway. Go to everyone on stage. And go to all the big shows that you can come anywhere near if you are near a big repertory production. And watch all of it. I'm sure there's endless hours of Shakespeare on YouTube. Watch as much of it as you can. Become familiar with it. The reading is the most intimidating way to go to Shakespeare. So don't beat yourself over the head about it. Don't overstrain yourself doing that when you don't need to. You should see it first. God knows how much complete Shakespeare is free on YouTube. That resource didn't even exist 30 years ago. When I was giving this kind of advice to people, I would say, well, you can go to the library, there'll be videotapes. And you can watch those videotapes. If you have a fairly good library, you can watch the videotapes. Now, I'm sure all of that is on YouTube. Probably a lot of it for free. So I'd strongly suggest that. And then one other thing, to really get into Shakespeare, to really enjoy it, is something that I've recommended many times before on this channel, which is, if possible, it's very dorky, but it's a lot of fun. If possible, find a group of like-minded friends, divvy up parts, and read Shakespeare. Right there in the living room. You can have beer or wine so that the readings are getting a little funnier and a little more fun as the play goes on. You can have plenty of food, make an evening of it, and read a whole Shakespeare play in parts together. That is enormous amounts of fun. Believe it or not, I know it sounds incredibly dorky, but it's enormous amounts of fun. I wish I had a circle like that. I would do that every week if I did. Then let's see here. Number 11, which is your favorite Shakespeare play and why? My favorite Shakespeare play is Henry VIII. I qualify that in a number of ways. It's a pageant play, so not a lot happens. And also, it's one of the plays where the authorship is most loudly contested, where the most prominent arguments are made that Shakespeare collaborated. So the normal mainstream answer that I usually give is Julius Caesar, which is also a little bit strange. It also, like Henry VIII, is heavily historical. It also, like Henry VIII, is a little lopsided in its action. It's a little bit weird in the way that it unfolds on the stage. But I love it, absolutely love it. So my answer has two parts to it. My personal favorite is Henry VIII, but I usually don't say that because I don't want the discussions that will follow from Shakespeare pedants. So I usually don't mention it. I usually just mention Julius Caesar. And then the final prompt is tag other booktubers. And in my later practice here on BookTube, I usually don't tag people for a number of reasons. One is that I like Sean the Bookmaniac's idea of an open tag, where you consider yourself tagged. If I don't name you, I don't want you to feel excluded. And also because a lot of the channels that I would tag are channels that are relatively new. They're certainly relatively new to me, and I don't know whether or not they would want to be tagged by me. I have no idea. I carry that baggage where other booktubers don't. So I'm going to tag you. If you have a booktube channel and you have seen this and you like this tag, please do it. I would certainly like to know your answers. Even if you don't have a booktube channel, you can feel free to tell me your answers. But anyway, that is the Shakespeare Journey tag to start off Shakestember. I will leave links down below to Kelly's video where she tags me, and their announcement videos, anything I think of to bring you into Shakestember. If you want to join in, you really should. But anyway, that's it for this tag. I will see you next time. Thank you, BookTube.